Welcome to Player Profiler Primetime News. I'm Mike Lindberg, and joined with me again, as always, is Coach Retzlaff, and we're here today bringing you everything you need to know headed into Week 14. Tonight, we've got a jam-packed show. Some key injury updates here. Taysom Hill, Christian McCaffrey. Oh, man, there's quite a few more. Jordan Mason went down, so we're going to have some top performer breakdowns, our bullish, bearish takes on some big name players, and we'll also dive into the coach's corner and chef's table of our Monday night primer of the Browns and Broncos. Don't miss a minute of it. Let's get right into it. Jeremiah, let's let it rip. What's going on, Jeremiah? How you doing tonight? Let's get you started on the top performers, QBs and RBs for Week 13.
Hey, hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. Welcome back. We're just going to grip and rip for the top performers. Josh Allen, QB5 entering the week, dominates in the snow, 28.4 fantasy points, 2 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown on that sweet lateral play, 148 passing yards, and just 18 yards rushing. If you look at the player profiler page for Josh Allen, it's just a beautiful sight to see. 4th in deep ball attempts, 7th in red zone attempts, 5th in fantasy points per drop back, 6th in best ball points added. It's that time of year now. Fantasy points per game, 4th, 21.4. Expected fantasy points per game, 19.2, number 7 overall. So he's all the way at the top of the charts. And then we have after him somebody earlier in the season who we were saying, in Dynasty, do you want Josh Allen? Do you want Jaden Daniels? Well, last week we talked about Jaden Daniels being the number 1 QB overall. This week he's the QB2 overall. Jaden Daniels comes away with 27.64 fantasy points. A second week in a row, again, he's making this list. 25 of 30 passing, unreal, 83% completion percentage. 206 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and there was an interception. It was a risky pass. It bounced off the offensive player. Could have been a better ball, so I'm sure Jaden Daniels would take the blame on that one. On the ground, Daniels looked healthy, 34 yards, 9 carries, and a rushing touchdown. Jaden Daniels had a rough stretch where he had his rib injury, and it culminated with that talk about Cliff Kingsbury plateauing as an offensive play caller, as well as dropping 3 straight games to the Steelers. Remember, that was 28-27, razor thin. Then the division rivals, Eagles, and then the Cowboys. So the Commanders have had, they have a Week 14 bye before they head off to the Coors Field of the NFL. They get to play the Saints in the Superdome. Now let's go to Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson with 26.86 fantasy points, 414 passing yards, 29 of 38 for his completions, 3 touchdowns to 1 interception. This was a vintage performance by Russ. 300-yard games this year seem hard to come by, and seeing a QB throw for 400 yards is remarkable. Russell Wilson is number 2 in passing EPX for our explosive rating here at Player Profiler, and that measures pass plays over 20 yards. It definitely helps when you have guys like George Pickens. The moon ball is working perfectly in Pittsburgh. In 6 games, Russ now has 3 top 12 games. Those finishes were QB3, 9, and this week he's quarterback 3. Honorable mention, Caleb Williams, 26.14 fantasy points. He feasted on Thanksgiving. Granted, there was a controversial ending where head coach Matt Eberflus didn't call a timeout. It left everybody dumbfounded. Even your family member who knows nothing about football thought it was terrible. But good on Caleb. He was able to support both Keenan Allen and DJ Moore in fantasy. Now, to the running backs. Bucky Irving, we keep hearing about league winners. Bucky Irving, one of the best late-round picks, and if he fell to your waiver wire, he's in contention for your waiver wire pickup of the year. 27.5 fantasy points, 25 carries, bell cow usage, 152 yards, and a touchdown. A perfect 3 of 3 receiving for 33 yards. We lamented last week about Bucky Irving getting bell cow usage, and he got it. Remember, Tucker and White took touchdowns from him. RB1 on the week. Irving is 14th in our explosive rating metric with a score of 109. Bucky was the RB21 heading into the week. In his last 7 games, he has 4 games as a top 12 running back. This is his third RB1 performance in a row. Now, Bijan was the RB5 entering the week. Coming off the Falcons' bye, he had his 5-game streak of 100 yards or more snapped in Week 11 versus Denver. Bijan ends the day, 25.5 fantasy points, 26 carries, very impressive. Tyler Algier was getting series at a time. Bijan had 102 yards on the ground, and he had a touchdown inside the 10. He was a perfect 6 for 6 with 33 yards receiving. He had such a good performance. It feels like there's a 40-burger out there, dare we say a Saquon Barkley game in the near future. The Falcons get the Raiders, Giants, and Commanders in the fantasy playoffs. Najee Harris, he got there today in both aspects. He's no more as a between-the-tackles guy. He went perfect 6 for 6 receiving, 454 yards, 75 yards on the ground, and he had a touchdown run. What a wild shootout, 44-38. That is not very Steelers-like. Najee was the RB24 heading into the week. He is a fine RB2 most weeks, so do not expect him to land up in this top tier, but you'll take the 24.9 fantasy points that you got today. That's all that matters for this week. Mike, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of surprises there, like you mentioned, but I mean, not so surprising as far as, the quarterback situation goes there. I like what I saw. Some big half performances in the first game, like the Podfather mentioned on the 10 Takeaway show this morning. It was really cool to see, not having to sit through 2 hours of boring warm up, and it got heavy and hard really fast in the first half of the 1 o'clock game. So it was really cool to see. And but what was really bad was these teams coming off of the Thanksgiving Day parade and turkey dinners, because it looked like they were stuffed, and a couple guys got stuffed. And Taysom Hill is feared to have a season-ending injury. Looks like a ligament tear, so he had a 2-yard run in that game. The MRI results confirm this diagnosis. He's expected to, miss the rest of the season, and somebody else looking like he's missing the rest of this season, and that is Christian McCaffrey. His PCL injury in Week 13 against the Bills. That injury will cut a short, frustrating season for McCaffrey, who already missed a significant amount of time earlier in the year, and the 101 pick has become the biggest bust of 2024 at this stage. When you see how prolific the position has been, with his absence, Jordan Mason was supposed to step up and take on that primary role, but he also suffered an ankle injury during that game and now is headed to the IR as well. So we're looking at Isaac Guerendo here as the waiver wire gem of the week now, headed into Week 14. So if you got waiver bucks left and you are a contender, Guerendo's athletic profile, everything that he has, encompassed so far this year, looking like it's going to be his show in that backfield, and there's not much behind him either. So this could be a very, very good situation if you can get on the Guerendo train, folks. So keep them coming. Trevor Lawrence, what a hit that was. That was one of the dirtiest hits I've ever seen in the NFL. Poor Trevor Lawrence should have maybe not played at all, but he was ruled out after that hit. Looks like a serious concussion, and I'm expecting him to miss Week 14, and his availability for the remainder of the season remains uncertain. So, Jeremiah, before I get back into the rest of these injuries, what are your thoughts on that hit and poor Trevor Lawrence?
Oh, just a brutal run, a terrible hit, absolutely dirty. There's no place in the game. And then right after the hit, he was chirping with the fans and trash talking the other players. Now, after the game, he seemed apologetic, but you really hate it for Trevor Lawrence. It was cool to see Trevor Lawrence come back and tough it out when he really didn't have to come back record-wise. He definitely won over a lot of his teammates if there was anybody on the fence, or cemented part of his reputation, I think, for a long time. Evan Ingram, way to step up, back your teammates up. You love to see it. From a fantasy standpoint, Mac Jones just isn't it. So I'm very sad. BTJ, I know you were big on him, Mike, with Trevor Lawrence coming back. We wanted BTJ. We love BTJ. And Mac Jones overthrew him a couple times for some deep balls. Very tough scene in Jacksonville. And you just hope, it's such a brutal game, that Trevor Lawrence is okay. Granted, he seems all right now, but I mean, he still got rocked real hard. And speaking of a player who's very, banged up right now, but he seems close, DeVonta Smith for the Eagles. It looks like he's on track to return in week 14, maybe 13. It was kind of a game time decision. The rest of their schedule, the Panthers, the Steelers, who were just in a shootout, Commanders, and Cowboys. So what do you make of that?
Well, Dallas Goedert suffering an injury too this week, I think is going to complicate things, but we know that this Philly offense now is really, it revolves around two players, and that's Saquon Barkley and AJ Brown. And obviously, we know Jalen Hurts as the quarterback, but those two offensive playmakers are the guys that are, getting it done for fantasy in the running back and wide receiver position. And, DeVonta Smith has been a fade for me all year. I had him as a stock down player, and I'm worried about his outlook moving forward with Barkley in this lineup. And I'm selling him in Dynasty at this stage because of these factors. I've seen him being worked out of that offense. And, when talent prevails, DeVonta Smith was a great talented player, but you got AJ Brown who can open up the field down, and they don't need to do much out of outside of Saquon Barkley, because he's just dominating the line of scrimmage. And he made, a couple big plays last night that it just was like, wow, head turning. So I'm worried about DeVonta Smith moving forward. And another guy that might be coming back here is Chris Olave. He's expected to return in week 15 after clearing concussion protocol. His return may depend on his own personal risk assessment. So something to monitor here. I know some of my fantasy teams that are still in contention are really looking forward to having Chris Olave back as maybe that flex guy. Noah Brown is dealing with a rib injury, might be able to play through it, but they got a bye coming up, so I'll have to see that. Not a guy I'm really circling back too much, as long as, unless it's a deeper league. We talked about J.K. Dobbins last week. He is on IR, so that backfield is completely muddled right now after what we saw. Gus Edwards wasn't very good with his starting role, and we saw Haskins fumble early, and Kamani Vidal wasn't where I expected him to be at this stage. So we'll see what happens with that, Chargers running back room moving forward. But they got a tough matchup, or was a tough matchup, against the Chiefs coming up here. But the last 2 weeks, the Chiefs have been exposed on their run game. So we'll see what happens there moving forward. Dallas Goedert, like I mentioned earlier, he has a knee injury. Rashad Bateman suffered a knee injury as well. There'll be some further testing. And, there was a Deontay Johnson, quote today that from Harbaugh. Not sure what his situation is, but something to monitor there moving forward, because the Ravens did not look as good this week at home against a Philly team that just came in and dominated the line of scrimmage. So we'll see what happens moving forward. So that's it about the kind of the major injuries. Oh, wait, Josh Downs. Looking like he's leaning towards his return this week as well. So he was well missed in that lineup this week. But shout out to the 230 live viewers on X and all our platforms. Let's keep it going. And like I said, if you guys have any started sick questions that you want to answer, put them in the chat. We're obviously here for that as well. So, thanks everybody for tuning in. And let's hear from our fearless leader there, Jeremiah, because he's got something to tell you all about.
Hey, you're in your fantasy draft and someone says, hey, that guy's injury prone, I don't want him. And you're like, I don't know, I don't think you can predict injuries. Well, guess what? Now you can! Injury proneness is real! At Player Profiler, we have the data on these players, and it's all in the Injury Finder app. their injury track record back through time, exactly where they were injured, how severe it is. We look at the BMI data, and we crunch it all together, and we give you probabilities that a player will miss multiple games this NFL season, as well as the complete database of NFL injuries and the ability to compare two players and look at their injury track record. The Injury Finder is powerful, and it's only $5. If it's worth it to have that peace of mind when you're drafting, go get it.
Yeah, go get it. Now, Jeremiah, go get the top performers at the tight end and wide receiver position for us, buddy.
So 3 familiar names. Terry McLaurin. Mike, you and I talked about him earlier in the offseason. It makes sense. Jaden Daniels lands at the top of the QB list. So does Terry McLaurin. You and I talked all offseason about the Daniels-McLaurin stack. You love to see it. A lot of perfection in the stat sheet this week amongst top 8 performers, top performers. 8 catches on 8 targets for Terry, 73 yards, 2 touchdowns, 27 fantasy points. We beg for his career, for him to get a quarterback. And you're seeing the player evaluation we've always had on Terry play to fruition. It wasn't your fault, Terry. Mike Evans, 25.8 fantasy points, 8 of 12, 118 yards and a touchdown. Baker to Mike Evans has been a viable connection all season. The passes that just come out, he has no business catching. He gets up, he's standing tall, and he catches it high with his hands. Just a great player and a future Hall of Famer. I know you're going to talk about him later, Mike. Keenan Allen, 24.3 fantasy points. Who says he's dust? 5 of 8 for 73 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's either LA next year or back to Chicago. I like that a lot for his prospects heading into next year. Speaking of prospects, Brock Bowers, 8 on Black Friday, went back for seconds. 30.2 fantasy points against the Super Bowl champs. 10 of 14 receiving, 140 yards, a touchdown. Brock Bowers, Dynasty tight end 1. If you have him for keeper, for Dynasty, you are ecstatic. If you're on a rebuilding team, make people pry him from your cold, dead hands. At tight end, Bowers is 2nd in fantasy points per game, 1st in targets, 5th in target share, 1st in receptions, receiving yards, and 1st in yards after catch. Just rip through that stat line on the player profiler sheet, and you'll love to see it. It's beautiful. Trey McBride. If there's one tight end who is on the heels of Brock Bowers, it is Trey McBride. A perfect 12 of 12 receiving, 96 yards, 21.6 fantasy points. What's missing between McBride and Bowers is the touchdown equity and, of course, target share. McBride gets open. I really personally blame Kyler Murray. He scrambles too long. He runs backwards. He throws the ball out of bounds. He's just all over the place. So Murray is actually the biggest blocker of Trey McBride's red zone efficiency. And then Jonnu Smith, there he is again. We talked about Jonnu here last week, a repeat offender. Tua is very comfortable with Jonnu underneath. 10 of 11 receiving, 113 yards. Jonnu Smith has the yak ability. So it's not just getting the ball underneath, it's athleticism. Defenses, they're not giving anything over the top to Tyreek Hill. And Hill also is dealing with that wrist injury. Jonnu hasn't missed a beat all year, and he's only gotten better through the season and through his career like a fine wine. The Dolphins draw the lowly Jets next week at home. So keep firing him up. He's been a gem. Mike, what do you make of the receivers and the tight ends?
Yeah, I'm more excited about the tight ends because I got a lot of Trey McBride stock. I got a decent amount of Bowers as well. So my fantasy teams went off this week, and I'm happy about it. So this tight ends, the landscape has changed this offseason to now, and the people that have Trey McBride and Bowers stocks, I think they're in their own tier right now, and it's actually separating themselves now from that tier, and it's something to see in Dynasty because both those guys have got bright futures and key roles in their offense moving forward. So it'll be interesting to see what happens on the offseason with the Raiders, and when they bring in a number 1 wide receiver, because that's bound to happen. And they got some draft capital. They have obviously looking forward to a quarterback, but they also have some cap space too to work with to bring in a big name. So I'm looking to see maybe a T. Higgins there. There's some chatter about that. So we'll see what happens in the offseason. I could see them bringing in somebody big, and we'll see how that affects Brock Bowers in the long run. Like we were thinking that it might affect the Trey McBride stock, but it didn't. So Trey McBride is becoming, just as elite, and I'm really liking what I see there. So let's go. Now, somebody else who's elite, and he's been doing it for 11 years, folks. And Mike Evans is on the verge of an incredible achievement in the NFL. Fantasy gamers should also be paying close attention because the Buccaneers wide receiver is currently chasing his 11th straight 1,000-yard season, a remarkable feat that would extend his streak of consistent dominance since entering the league in 2014. Evans is not just putting up numbers. He's making history after his standout one-handed touchdown catch in Week 12. He has now reached 101 career touchdown receptions, firmly cementing his place among the NFL's elite. With over 1,000 yards in each of his previous 10 seasons, Evans is poised to deliver another strong finish, and I think they're looking to get him there. So he's going to be poised to have a really, really strong finish, especially since the Bucs are right in the heat of that playoff race in that divisional title. So Evans is looking to make history, and I think the Bucs are going to be pushing him to get there because he's their best playmaker. Obviously, Bucky Irving's had a career, year for a rookie. So we're going to have to continue to monitor that. But that 1-2 punch, and Mike Evans will continue to be a focal point of that offense as long as Mayfield keeps looking his way. Evans should remain a high volume option in both real life and in fantasy football. So for fantasy gamers, Evans' continued success means big points in the final weeks of the regular season, and his ability to rack up yards and find the end zone. We know last year he was a league winner in the playoffs, and it could happen again here, folks. His Week 12 performance, where he quickly found the end zone and helped the Bucs to a lead, is the preview of what's to come in a fantasy landscape full of uncertainty. Evans is proven to be a producer who can be counted on to deliver week in and week out. So I'm looking for this push for the division title, and Evans chasing his 11th straight 1,000-yard season. I could just see him going nuclear season out here. So his stock is on the rise, and I got some Evans stocks, and I've been, I was hurting in the middle of the year. Now I'm getting him back, and this is really, really good stuff here. So what are your thoughts on Mike Evans?
Well, with Mike Evans, look at this schedule. He gets the Raiders, to your point, trying to push for 1,000 yards. He gets the Raiders at home. He gets the Chargers, who they've been more in a game script throw mode. So it's not like you're going to get a slow down, condensed amount of possessions necessarily. You might get more shootout potential. The Dallas Cowboys in Dallas, that could be, even if it's not a shootout city, it could be dog walk city for the Buccaneers. Then they get the Panthers week 17, and then you're talking about week 18 in the Coors Light. Granted, it may not be fantasy playoffs for us, but for some of that seasonal stuff, maybe Mike Evans needs to bite off 70 yards week 18. I certainly think he can do it. So it's a great call, Mike. And would you give up a late first in Superflex 2025 right now for Mike Evans if you're contending?
I honestly think I would if you're contending. I mean, it's all for, I'm very aggressive when it comes to that, and I know I can recoup those value picks down the line. It's a draft pick, and the only time those are the most valuable is when the draft happens. So, those values are going to increase. I'm doing that. Absolutely. I think Mike Evans is a league winner here. Like I just said it in my spiel. So how can I not back what I'm saying here? So we got Chev on the mic here. What up, Chev?
What's up, Chev?
Bucky Irving or Jonathan Taylor rest of season. I mean, look at the Bucs remainder schedule. Jeremiah just pegged it out there. I'm going with Bucky Irving. It's hard not to. They've got, a juicy schedule rest of season, and I'm going bold here. What about you, Jeremiah?
I'm with it, and especially I feel like you can get more multiplicity in the passing game and the run game, and that's not saying that JT can't handle it in the passing game, but Anthony Richardson is going to be less adept to dump that ball off than is Baker Mayfield to just dump it off to Bucky Irving. Now, I read the Buccaneers schedule, so let's read the remaining Colts schedule. Broncos, they're a tougher defense.
Yeah.
Titans,
Tough.
they got dog walk this week, but they're actually tougher, right? Yep. Oh, same page. We open a book. We're on the same page. The Giants, that could be dog walk city for the Colts. They could get up. But remember, you have Anthony Richardson, who is maybe doing the tush push or maybe carrying it and taking it in himself inside the 5. So those layup touchdowns just aren't necessarily there. Baker Mayfield's not going to do that to Bucky Irving. So I think we ride at dawn. As Chev says, it's Bucky Irving season. People are talking about league winners. And if you don't have Bucky Irving on your team, don't think necessarily that there aren't other league winning players out there. You have to think in best ball, advance rate. Joe Burrow has been on a lot of quarterback best ball rates for best ball teams. Saquon Barkley, about half. Brock Bowers, I think the number was like 37%. And then Jamar Chase is another player. So you have studs and you have back-end players. Isaac Garendo, they're talking about him being a league winner. Remember, you have to do it every single week. And I was actually lamenting and thinking about this earlier today. When we think about league winner, I think you have to think more so of the fact that it's a guy who can get you there or put you over the top. But to really get every single week and to win your championship week, it does take a lot. So I think of league winners as a host of players who can get you there along the way, push you over the pile, and get you into being one of those final 6 teams, right? And then at that point, there's little variance and it's a percentage play. But absolutely, we ride at dawn for Bucky Irving season. Love you, Chev.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Thanks for tuning in, guys. All right. So if you are enjoying the show, don't miss out on more exclusive content. Subscribe to the Player Profiler YouTube channel at Profiler_news. Follow us on Twitter at Profiler_NFL and visit our website at www.playerprofiler.com/news for all the latest and breaking news and its impact on fantasy football. Stay ahead of the game with Player Profiler. Now, Jeremiah, one of our favorite segments here. It's our bullish and bearish takes. And what do you got for bullish this week, buddy?
0-1. Come on.
All right, Mike, I'll try and truncate it a little bit because we want to get to our Monday Night Football. But we got some great questions in the club tonight. Great requests from everybody. So everybody put in your requests. Everybody at least gets one, right? We're bullish, we're bearish. It kind of sounds funny. I'm bullish on some Bears. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen have had a nice last 2 weeks collectively against division rival Vikings and the Lions. Matt Eberflus is out of town, so optimism is up. I know it's the Bears. Bears will say, hey, we could get Patrick Mahomes, and it would still be a dumpster fire. But since I have not been hurt by the Bears, I'm going to have optimism. The numbers the last 2 weeks versus the Vikings: DJ Moore, wide receiver 4, Keenan Allen, wide receiver 5. Moore caught 7 of 7 for 106 yards, a touchdown, 26.9 fantasy points. Keenan Allen, 15 targets against the Vikings, 9 catches, 86 yards, and a touchdown, wide receiver 5 in week 12. Follow up, week 13 for the Lions. It's almost a mirror reflection for the Bears duo. Keenan Allen, wide receiver 3 on the week, heading into tonight's game. And then he had the 2 touchdowns, 73 yards. DJ Moore, 8 of 16, a lot of targets. He only caught half of them. Imagine if he connected with 2/3, right? Touchdown for DJ Moore, remarkable. Wide receiver 6 heading into tonight's games. In the last 2 games, Rome Odunze, the rookie, drew 10 targets versus the Vikings and 2 red zone targets. He also had 6 targets in week 13. It isn't all there yet for Rome. Rome wasn't built in a day, but you got to trust the player evaluation you had coming into the season. Buy Rome Odunze in Dynasty if you can. he will definitely be a target of mine when the 2025 ADP drops. I'm curious to see that. Mike, what's your bearish?
Shout out to the 406 people watching live. We got a nice crowd here tonight, so shout out to y'all. Well, my bearish is going to piss off a lot of people, but I mean, a lot of people are taking it on the chin right now for CeeDee Lamb's value, and he's taken a significant hit. And despite his past success, he is now more of a wide receiver 2 than a wide receiver 1 for fantasy gamers for the rest of the season, who expected him when they drafted him as a top pick, to be a little bit better than he is now. His struggles with consistency, unclear injury status, and a reduced role in Dallas's offense is tough to ignore. Wide receiver 26 in fantasy points per game so far this year is signaling he's not producing at the elite level he's expected to. Season low, 68% snap share in week 13. He played just that low number, 2 receptions and 6 targets, solid 6 targets in week 13, but only caught 2 passes for 39 yards. His decreasing target share, I think he's a little bit more banged up than meets the eye, and without a solidified number 2, his tight end is banged up, and that run game isn't what it used to be. So, CeeDee Lamb is no longer that elite wide receiver 1 many expected when they drafted him. So I'm a little bit bearish on CeeDee Lamb, and I'm adjusting my expectations. I think he's more of a mid-range wide receiver 2. So you're looking at wide receiver 18 to 24 range rest of season. Sometimes you just got to recalibrate your expectations and avoid getting burned. And that's what I'm doing with CeeDee Lamb.
I like it. And going back to Chev, he said he got Rome for Cup, Mingo in a third. I would figure if you're trying to rebuild a little bit, that's a solid move to go in that direction. Be curious to see where your team is at that point. What do you think of that trade, Mike?
Well, I think that, the Cup owner, the guy who's getting Cup, is probably in contention here, and they're looking to kind of push it in here at this stage. And Rome isn't where he needs to be at this stage, but I think with Keenan Allen still in the mix, and he had a big game, and DJ Moore getting those design plays off the line, those shorter intermediate routes, they're not looking for him downfield as much. They're really looking to target him. So I like what they've done since the Shane Waldron firing. So let's get it on. All right, Coach, talk to us about Coach's Corner. Let's go.
All right. We're out here on our best behavior. Coach's Corner, I got the Browns tonight. Their offensive outlook, or will it be an offensive outlook? Jameis Winston in the last month, QB 10, 22, 7, 18, all over the place, right? Ups and downs as you would expect. You expect the volatility. You're more excited for his weapons and interceptions, be damned, as it allows the Browns to just be in throw mode. That's where the magic can happen. Jameis gets to face his former coach, Sean Payton, so it'll be interesting to see how the Broncos defense attacks Jameis. From NFL stats, the Browns offensive line has given up 47 sacks. It's the second most in the league, so expect Jameis to be under pressure and, of course, make some mistakes. Speaking of familiarity, Jerry Jeudy returns to Denver, hoping for a revenge game. Jeudy had his best production with Jameis Winston this season. In the last 4 games, Jeudy has scored 12.9, 14.3, 26.2, so up, and 14.5 points. So the 26-point game, Jerry Jeudy was a wide receiver 5 on the week. Jeudy is a safe bet to score those safe points in the 12 to 14-point range with Jameis Winston. When Jeudy lands in the end zone, it can really push him to that 20-point PPR outcome. So my prediction tonight, if Jeudy finds the end zone, he's going to clear 20 PPR points. Jeudy is 20th in receiving yards with 645, 27th in receptions with 45, 15th in unrealized air yards, and 9th in air yards with 957. Jeudy sits at wide receiver 30, so these stats make sense. All right, it's remarkable, though, considering Deshaun Watson was a dumpster fire to start the season. Elijah Moore, I was just lamenting and thinking, will he ever get right, or is his career just set to be a guy who never hit? He's still just 24 years old, so my eyes just did like a pop out when I saw that. I was like, wait a second, no, don't get too positive again. Don't think into next year that maybe he could go to another team or he could rise with a better quarterback. Don't do it. He's just 24. Waiver wire darling, Cedric Tillman, he's out with a concussion after logging all DNPs this week. This game sets up to provide great opportunity for David Njoku. David Njoku, tight end 13 this season. He's been squandered in Cleveland, to say the least. Name any good to elite quarterback and picture what Njoku could do. Imagine David Njoku for me with Justin Herbert. I put out a tweet on the Player Profiler page where we said, what quarterback would you love to have David Njoku throwing to him? And the guy said Joe Flacco. So hat tip to that. That's excellent. We love Joe Flacco throwing to him. Keep in mind with Njoku, he's only played 8 games this year. 4 of them, he's been a tight end 1. So Njoku really disappeared in the snow game versus the Steelers. From Rotoballer, the Broncos have given up the 10th fewest points to tight ends this season. So that's a hammer matchup tonight. For the run game, Nick Chubb was the RB8 in Week 12 versus Steelers in the snow. 2 gimme touchdowns, just hit 60 yards rushing on the nose. Took 20 carries to get there on a 64% snap share. I've got nothing but love for Nick Chubb. Who doesn't love some Chubb in their life, right? Chubb was a fade this year. I faded J.K. Dobbins and Nick Chubb. So process-wise, I feel like it's at least a net neutral. As fantasy gamers, we tend to see just our losses and not reel in on some of the good calls. So, can't beat yourself up over everything that you miss because there's a lot of things that you do get right. Then Jerome Ford, I'll finish off, and we'll kick it to you, Mike, for the Broncos. Really fell off after Week 1. I was looking at his numbers. Jerome Ford he was an RB1 with 18.9 fantasy points in Week 1 versus the Cowboys. Last week, only 35% snap share, 4 carries. It's pretty much Jover for him. Mike, what can you tell us in your chef's table tonight about the Denver Broncos?
Let's go. I got something cooking up. Let's hear about it. So headed into tonight, there are some options to monitor as the Browns face off against the Broncos that I'll be previewing tonight. Bo Nix has been on a tear since Week 5, currently sitting at the quarterback 6 in fantasy points per game. His numbers have been impressive, ranking 4th in touchdown passes, 7th in passer rating, and 6th in completion percentage over expected. His accuracy has been remarkable. He's only 12th. He's 12th in highly accurate throw rate. So this is incredible stats for a rookie. Over the past few weeks, the Browns have allowed the 3rd highest yards per attempt and the 2nd highest passer rating. So this means good things for Bo Nix, who's got his name in the hat for sure. Probably pretty deep in that hat for the Offensive Rookie of the Year award, alongside obviously Jaden Daniels and now Brock Bowers, who's made a strong case for that as well. So on the receiving end, Bo Nix's success has been on the heels of Cortland Sutton, and he's emerged as a must-start fantasy option. Over the last 5 games, Sutton has caught 36 passes for 467 yards and 3 touchdowns, propelling him into the top 15.5 PPR points. He is at least 8 targets in those games, which speaks to his role as an improving rookie quarterback. Bo Nix's primary target. Sutton has been a touchdown machine like he was last year. And after signing that, raise, he's been on fire. Sutton's fantasy outlook is strong, and Denver's backfield, well, it remains a muddled mess. Javonte Williams has been a disappointment over the last few weeks with a poor showing in Week 12, just 10 touches for 4 yards. further lowering his value. Williams has struggled to produce even while playing 56% of the snaps, making him impossible to trust for fantasy gamers right now. While they're still rosterable, it's hard to see a scenario where he provides value unless there's a significant shift in the backfield. Adding uncertainty to the Broncos backfield, Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime are both part of the committee, making it difficult to recommend either as a viable starter. On the receiving end for the Broncos as well, we got Devon Vele, who's quietly been emerging as a strong fantasy option, finishing as a top 24 wide receiver in 2 of his last 3 games, wide receiver 21 and wide receiver 22 respectively, with a 17% target share since week 10 and a 22% first read share. He's becoming more of an integral part of that offense. He's also seen 2 red zone targets in the last 3 games, which gives him a solid opportunity to score, given that Cleveland has allowed the 5th highest PPR points per target to slot receivers since week 7. Vele has a favorable matchup and should be considered as a strong flex play tonight. His usage in the passing game is on the rise, making him an intriguing option, especially in deeper leagues. So in summary, this is a game that, might not produce a lot of fantasy points, but a couple guys to note. Bo Nix should be okay. Cortland Sutton should be okay. And Devon Vele as a sleeper should also be okay tonight. Now, Jeremiah, I want to thank the 460 plus people watching live tonight. It's been a great show. Appreciate everybody from tuning in, and we're getting close to the fantasy playoffs here. If you're not already started, they're going to start next week or the week after. So hopefully we've put you in a really good position to win yourself a championship. What do you got to say to our viewers tonight, Jeremiah, before we let them roll into the Monday nighter?
One note on Tankathon, one related to the game, and then a message for totality, as you were alluding to. Cleveland is 8th on Tankathon right now, so it would be in their best interest tonight to lose, 30-29 and just, not get there per se. You want to have a better player, better opportunity, and push higher in the draft order. And then, of course, for NFL real-life standings, keep an eye. The Broncos are right there at the razor's edge in the AFC, 7th ranked, 7-5. They're just ahead of the Indianapolis Colts, who I believe we just mentioned they're going to play each other. So that could be excellent matchup as well to watch. I would just say you're at the end. You've made it. It's a grind. Think of all those games where you won because you were up by 12 and somebody really should have gone off on Monday Night Football and they only got 9 or 10 points and you just had that razor's edge win. Those victories happen over the course of the year. And just remember what it takes to get you there. Sometimes you're pushing along. There's these records where there's like 4-win teams, 5-win teams, 6-win teams. There's been a big crunch in a lot of leagues I've seen, from second all the way down to some of the playoff teams who are out. So right down to the final week, you are grinding, and it's taken a lot of punches to knock everybody out. So ideally, you are all in just about every single league that you have. Granted, you have some contending dynasty teams, you have some rebuilding ones, but in your redraft teams, you're locking in. Stay positive. Fill out those lineups right to the very end. If you have Isaac Guerrero, if you have the most fab dollars right now, you've got him. You're backing into an RB1. The future is bright. And then, of course, we have playoffs that we can look forward to, all the best ball out there. And then, of course, the off-season grind. So there's a lot to look forward to. We will see you next week.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to PlayerProfiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, Data Analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.